Yani a lot of these theological arguments are nothing but speculation. Every conclusion deduced by the mind, not based on evidence, is counted as speculation. And therefore we have hadith in specific forbidding and prohibiting man from delving into conversations in regards to the Dhat of Allah Azza wa Jal, for obvious reasons. However, in regards to your particular question and to the scope of our discussion, in the words of Alam al-Majlisi rahmatullah alayh, which is echoed within the hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, he says, أنه تعالى يعني صفاته عين ذاته. The attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the core of His essence. You cannot separate between the attributes of Allah and the essence of Allah Azza wa Jal. His attributes are His essence. His essence are His attributes. They cannot be separated. This is one. Number two, to claim, by way of example, what you have put forward, that Allah Azza wa Jal at one time was not alim and then became alim. This supposition would mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going through a constant change and is in a constant form of development, wal-'ayadhu billah, and this would necessitate the imperfection of the Creator, because there was a time where He didn't know and now He knows. The fact that there was a particular time where He didn't know, then that moment in time captures imperfection of the Creator. And we have established in the previous chapters that the imperfection of the Creator is a logical impossibility. If there is an imperfection, He does not deserve to be a deity to begin with. And therefore, this concept of the wajib al-wujud, having infinite kamal and jamal, is a necessary conclusion that the mind deduces when it comes to identifying who is the ma'bud, who is the Lord, who is the one to be worshipped. For to answer your question, the way Alama Majlisi says, Sifatuhu aynu dhatih, and this is something which is established by Sayyid Abdullah Shabbar over here as well. There cannot be any infikak. See, for a human being, and the ilm, by the way, this is just something that has come to my mind, and inshallah when we speak about the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being an alim, the ilm of Allah is different from the ilm of the human being. You and I, the ilm or the knowledge that we possess is not an essential part of our existence. It is an additional part to our existence. The fact being that we began as juhala, or I began as a jahil, and then made the effort to gain this ilm. I didn't know and now I know. There is a process. This ilm is ilm which is iktisabi. It is something that is additional to my essence as a human being. The affair in its entirety is different when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the ilm of Allah the Creator cannot be compared to the ilm of the creation. Having said this, if we were to move on, the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we said, divided into two: the positive attributes and the negative attributes, sifat thubutiyya and the sifat salbiyya. And we spoke a little bit about the sifat thubutiyya, yes, in the aspect of perfection and how perfection cannot be captured. Yes. If perfection is to be captured, then that in itself is a limitation, and that limitation is not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For moving on, the first attribute that the author discusses within the book is the sifat of Qudra.
Powerful, omnipotent.
Ahsantum. What is translated as all powerful or omnipotent,
Yes.
if I'm pronouncing
That's
it
correct.
correctly, omnipotence.
Yes.
In that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has unrestricted, uncontrolled power and domain over everything
Okay.
in existence and not in existence.
Are we talking more of an authority as power, or are we talking about power as in control and strength?
Both of them.
MashaAllah.
And each one is a different shade of this qudra. It is, alhamdulillah, you mentioned this. You find that within the Quran, we have about just over, give or take, roughly, you have about 50 verses within the Quran that use the word qadir or qadir or muqtadir in its different variations. وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ, for example. 50 verses within the Quran that speak about 50 shades of this qudra ilahiyya, power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes the power is in regards to that which exists and that which does not exist, from a level of creation, from a level of control, from a level of domain. And hence, this is advice for myself, for yourself and for our dear viewers, that as you embark upon a journey of learning usuluddin or even teaching usuluddin, and in particular this can be very beneficial for those brothers and sisters who teach in the madaris, in the madrasa on the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, or even researchers, for us researching in the way of Islam, is that when you look at, for example, the classical texts like Haqqul Yaqeen and the topic on Qudra, then a person searches up all the verses of the Quran with its different verbal constructions, to look at how the word Qudra or Qadr is used within the Quran. And from here, a person is able to understand the concept of Qudra through the words of Allah Azza wa Jalla. You find that when we talk about Qudra, yani this omnipotence, unlimited, unrestricted power, in contrast to the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal is not incapable. Sometimes you can have a concept, but in order to understand that concept, you can only understand the concept by analyzing that which is opposite to the concept.
Yes, I understand what you mean.
Because the power of Allah, the domain and the authority of Allah Azza wa Jal is unrestricted, and the mind in itself is restricted, we are able to understand this concept by looking at that which is opposite. So the fact that Allah is not incapable, Allah Azza wa Jal's authority is not restricted, from looking at the opposite, we are able to ascertain this concept in its entirety. Or we are able to understand this concept, astaghfirullah. We can never understand the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Get a better idea. Otherwise, we cannot understand or comprehend the qudra of Allah Azza wa Jal in its entirety. So therefore, the author says over here, أنه ta'ala, when he begins by describing the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the proof in establishing that Allah has power and domain over everything, he begins by saying أنه تعالى قادر, يعني ليس بعاجز, he is not incapable, لا يعجزه شيء من الأشياء. There is nothing which he is incapable of doing or of performing. And he says that the proof of this qudra, the author says, the proof of this qudra is divided or can be understood through three different faculties or through three different dimensions. The first one is استحالة الصانعية بدون القدرة, the impossibility of the creation or the act of creation to occur without the attribute of power. If the Lord is incapable to begin with, then how can he create? Because the creation is a demonstration of that power which is possessed by the deity. If the power or the deity does not have power to begin with, doesn't have the ability to create, then the creation can't come into existence. You have to have that ability. This is one. Number two, إن العجز نقص لا يليق بالكامل. Inability, which is the opposite of qudra, of being all powerful or to be restricted in your power, this in itself is a limitation. And we established from the previous chapters, anything that is limited does not deserve to be a creator.
Indeed.
And the third aspect over here is that he says صدور الأفاعيل العجيبة منه تعالى الدالة على كمال قدرته. And this is where the discussion is.
Inshallah, Shaykh. MashaAllah. Thank you very much. We have to go for a short break now, but inshallah, please join us after the break as we'll discuss more on the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After the break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the live Facebook. Shaykhna, we were discussing sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the thubutiyya one, and we wanted to discuss qadr and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being all powerful and omnipotent. You mentioned 3 points here, and the first one was the creator cannot be perfect without having a perfect creation. So do you think that a perfect creation shows the power and the perfection in its creator?
Of course, the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is demonstration of the power of the Creator. What needs to be understood over here is that in regards to Qudrah, the power of Allah, the scope of this power is that Allah Azza wa Jal has, number one, absolute power over everything that exists and everything that does not exist. Person might ask you, how can you have power over something that doesn't exist?
Perfect question.
If it doesn't exist to begin with, how can you have power over it? If I was to come and tell you, Sayyid Murtada's son is very naughty. You tell me, what do you mean Sayyid Murtada's son is naughty? He's not even married, he doesn't even have a son yet. So
Yes.
how can you put the hukum that his son is naughty and his son is not even born yet?
Exactly.
So how can you say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you like that example, huh? How can you say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has qudra over things that don't even exist? And over here the ulama come forward and they say that the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the power to bring something from non-existence into existence shows the power that He has over the realm of non-existence. Because He has that power to bring that non-existence into existence or keep that non-existence within the realm of non-existence, He has absolute authority and power over it. And act with it or deal with it in the manner that He wishes, Azza wa Jalla. So this is one. And then you have, in this regards to your question, the perfection within the creation is an exhibition of this unrestricted, unlimited, infinite power of Allah Azza wa Jal. And you find that within this Qudrah, when you try and contemplate over those aspects of creation that are an exhibition of this Qudrah, you find that together with Qudrah, there are other sifat of Allah Azza wa Jal that also come into mind. And from here, we begin to understand that the attributes of ilm and Qudrah and idrak and irada and hikmah are all one in essence. Yani is one in essence. Not only are the attributes inseparable from the essence, but the attributes in themselves with their differences in names are one and intertwined. And when I use the word intertwined, yani use it very cautiously from a manner in which we are able to understand. Otherwise, the way we established in the first part of the show, the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ayn, are the core of His dhat, of the essence of Allah Azza wa Jal.
Shaykhna, what do you say to those who say that, oh no, there are imperfections in the creation? For example, they may say the human errors and the human makes mistakes and causes destruction, or this is not right in the world and that's not right in the world, saying that there's no imperfection. Is this correct? Does this premise actually have any weight?
Imperfection in terms of creation or imperfection in terms of the actions by the creation? If you're talking about the actions of insan Bani Adam, this is a separate discussion. There's an answer for that, but it's a separate discussion. Imperfection within the creation, yani what? For example, you have imperfection in the manner that, for example, a tree that grows out from the ground that was supposed to yield fruit didn't yield fruit. This is an imperfect creation. And how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create something imperfect? This is one. Or the non-believer, the one who doesn't believe in Tawheed, will come and say that this is proof that your God, that who you say is perfect, is imperfect, because we have proof over here that a tree or the seeds that were planted within the ground came and yielded no or didn't yield any fruit when it was supposed to yield fruit, and hence this is an example of imperfection. And now we say that in your eyes, what you perceive to be an imperfection in reality is perfection. Why? Because this tree that has sprouted out from the ground not yielding fruit is a product of a system known as cause and effect. So perhaps the soil being infertile,
Yes.
or the seed in itself being corrupt from the beginning, or the chemicals added into the ground,
Yes.
for this tree to grow up in an imperfect way. Yani the tree responds perfectly to this system of cause and effect in itself is a demonstration of the perfection of Allah
So we're
subhanahu wa
looking
ta'ala.
at the conditions that have been placed upon such a seed, and the seed actually reacted perfectly to the surrounding conditions.
Ahsantum. The system of cause and effect. So long as the seed or the creation is subject to this system of cause and effect, this system of cause and effect which is designed by the Almighty Lord, then it is perfection in its core. Human being cannot logically state that because I hit my head on the wall and I bleed, I am imperfect. La. The perfection of your bodily creation, the perfection of the biology that functions within you dictates that if you hit yourself or hit your head against a sharp object, naturally you will bleed. That fragility is an expression of your perfection. And therefore, everything has to be understood within its scales in a much more precise manner than that which is zahiri. But the point that I want to discuss over here, the third point that Allama Shabbar rahmatullah alayhi says that the strange and the beautiful, perfect creation, perfection within creation, is an elaboration or an illustration of the qudrah, the power of Allah Azza wa Jal. And you find that Imam Sadiq, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, master of the madhab, has numerous hadith in this regard. And there is an entire compilation in regards to understanding Tawheed from the perfection within creation from a scientific perspective that Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam dictated to one of his companions by the name of Mufaddal ibn Umar. And this writing is very famously known as Tawheed al-Mufaddal,
Which is available also in English.
which is available in English. Ahsantum, is available online. And I believe that this is one of the greatest scientific approaches that have been used to establish not only to establish the existence of Allah Azza wa Jal, but in order to understand the qudrah and the hikmah of Allah Azza wa Jal to the extent that is possible by the human mind.
Shaykh, I was actually, I was reading the book. I had a chance to actually have a glimpse over it, and I was reading a section on the tear, and it was discussing how the tear allows fluid from the brain to escape and to be, you could say, to be removed from the brain through the tears, and how, and we're talking about with infants, and how it's very, very important that this fluid is removed. Now, you and I both know with babies, they cry a lot.
The newborn baby especially.
Yeah, especially a newborn baby cries a lot. And you could see how scientifically Imam Sadiq, salamu alayhi, he has shown that it is so important for this baby to cry, for the chemicals and the fluids that are within the brain have to be released from the baby's brain in order for it to develop more.
Ahsantum. And this is, this is it. These are answers that are given to us by divine individuals selected and appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the gateways of knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal. You find that within this is the power, the qudra of Allah Azza wa Jal. How powerful is this Lord? And together with this power is the hikmah of Allah. What we were just previously shortly saying, that you find that the sifat come to overlap one over the other. The power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that He is able to create this infant, and then you find that for the well-being of this infant, the manner in which these additional fluids that are in the brain or around the brain, how they are then going to be released, either through the nasal passage or through tears in the eyes, but secretion of this fluid is absolutely necessary for the well-being of that newborn infant. Who put this system into place? Who has the power to even, if I can use these words in human terms, to conceive such a concept? That this is the manner in which the fluid will be secreted, and for this reason the baby will cry. This perfection, not only does it show the perfection of the Creator, not only does it show the wisdom of the Creator, not only does it illustrate the knowledge of the Creator, but it illustrates the power of the Creator. And these are words that I'm using for us in humanly terms to humanly understand. Otherwise, the concept is much grander than this. And to speak of Allah Azza wa Jal in this manner brings chills to the spine, because of the amount of caution that you have to use to not misrepresent Allah Azza wa Jal, even through the words while we are discussing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, it is so important to keep emphasizing on this. Sifatuhu aynu dhatih. His attributes cannot be separated from His essence. His essence are His attributes are His essence. They are inseparable. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wal-'ayadu billah does not go through a thinking process, فَإِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَكُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ. He wants something to happen. It's this amr, kun, be, and it is. And this is the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it shows the power of Allah Azza wa Jal for such a beautiful system. Tawheed al-Mufaddal is filled with this when it comes to anatomy and biology, and understanding the perfection within our own creation in order to deduce the conclusion of the existence and the power of Allah Azza wa Jal. Recommend all the viewers, Tawheed Mufaddal needs to be a necessary part of our tarbiyah.
Definitely. Especially in this modern day and age where science is prevailing, and a lot of people look for scientific evidence and scientific proof. Alhamdulillah, Imam Sadiq, managed to pass on that knowledge, and you could say that he could foresee it, that in the future they would need such proofs and such evidences in order to bring people towards Islam and understand.
In my opinion, first of all, a number of things. Number one, unlike other religions that even claimed to be Abrahamic or claimed to be monotheistic, you find that for the longest time the religious establishments were always against science.
Yes.
They felt that they were threatened by science. Whereas when you come to Islam, you see that the amr, that the affair is totally the opposite.
Indeed.
Islam encourages science, and Islam encourages research and development in all fields of science, stretching from physics to biology. And for the one who studies these sciences and he sees the perfection within creation or the laws of creation, he ultimately comes to the conclusion of the existence of this deity or this superpower, creation, creator of the universe and everything within existence and non-existence, Allah Azza wa Jalla. So Islam encourages this, number one. Number two, in particularly to Tawheed al-Mufaddal, I personally believe that there are a number of concepts within this book, scientific concepts within this book, that have not yet been proven from a scientific perspective.
So you're saying the West haven't discovered it yet?
West hasn't even discovered it, or the West is not yet able to establish or assert this. The Imam was speaking way beyond his time, and even a lot of the ilm that the Imam has then, for this day and age, the human mind is not able to accept this. I'll give you something that is unrelated. Fada'il of Amirul Mu'mineen.
Yes.
Some of the people are of the opinion that the Fada'il of Amirul Mu'mineen is rejected because they are not able to fathom.
And these people are Shia as well. Some of these people are actually Shia as well.
Shia Baba claim to be intellectuals. Under the name of intellectualism, they discount these superhuman feats of Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam, under the name of intellectualism. Whereas the reality is that because of the lack of intellectualism, they are not able to fathom these fada'il. And only time will tell. Only time will tell. But my point that I was going to say is that a lot of these concepts in regards to anatomy and biology that are found within the book Tawheed al-Mufaddal, a lot of them have not been asserted or established or verified by science. And in my humble opinion, one of the greatest services that could be done in this day and age, mu'mineen, mu'minat, Shia brothers, sisters in universities who are within this field of biology, within the field of physics, have a read through Kitab Tawheed Mufaddal. And you pick one aspect of research which has not yet been established. Pick this one point of research by Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam and begin a thesis on this within the university. Conduct research on this. Let there be R&D, the way they say, research and development, in regards to these claims that are made by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, such that when they are established, people are able to go back and say, this is the deen of Ali Muhammad, this is the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, the real deen with the real ilm, and the ilm in itself is with Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. So, for example, the example that you just came forward with, that the release of the tears is actually the release of certain fluids that is necessary for a newborn baby to secrete in order for normal brain development. This should be a thesis for research conducted within the universities, and journals to be written about this under the medicine or the contribution towards anatomy or biology by Imam Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Tayyib. For the perfection of the creation in one essence shows the power of Allah Azza wa Jal.
Shaykhna, final point, final thought as we're coming towards the end of the show, that you would want the viewers to take from this discussion that we've had today, that we've been talking about the creation and the perfection of the creation, showing the power and the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
What I would say, as the author says over here, number one, look into the verses of the Quran that speak about the power of Allah, qudra. And two important verses of the Quran that need to be emphasized on, Surah An-Nur, verse number 45, and Surah Al-Fatir, verse number 44. Look at the manner in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Qudra, His power. What is the context in which He is stating that He is the all-powerful? This will give us a good understanding of this aspect of Qudra, which is a fundamental part of the Sifat Thubutiyya, number one. And number two, to read through the book Tawheed Mufaddal. Tawheed Mufaddal will allow a person to understand the grandeur of their Lord by looking at their own creation. The person who understands his own creation will definitely take a big leap towards understanding his Creator.
Thank you very much, Shaykhna. Thank you to all our viewers for joining us on this live show. Inshallah, we'll be back on the next episode, and inshallah, we'll continue with this discussion because there's a lot more for us to cover, inshallah, on the Sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Oh